Hi everyone, welcome to my video number 2 of my Python tutorial for absolute beginners. In this video, first of all, I'm gonna answer a question I received on my last video. The question was about IDE. What does it mean? Integrated Development Environment. Okay, in the web you are going to find a lot of IDE. For example, PyCharm, Jupyter, Anaconda. So in 3 or more lessons, I'm going to show you how to install one of them. Okay, now I'm gonna cover if-else statement. Okay, now I'm gonna cover if-else statement. Okay, this is a very important command in programming. Okay, and by the end of this video you'll be able to create a simple body mass index calculator, okay, using this statement if-else. So remember, on the last video we worked on classespersonales.com. Here to find Python, and there is an access to Python Online. Yeah. If-else statement is a very important command which performs different actions depending on whether a condition evaluates to true or false. In this case, the condition is A, and if it's true, the command B are going to be executed. Or if it's false, the command C are going to execute. Okay? The condition is A. If it's true, the command B is going to be executed. But if the condition A is false, so the command C are going to be executed. Okay, let's try with one example. So we need to identify the smallest value of two numbers. Okay, let's try with memory 1 equals 8 and memory 2 equals 5. Certainly the smallest value is M2 because 5 is less than 8. But let's try using the if-then statement. Okay, the condition here would be M1 is less than M2, memory 1 is less than memory 2. In this case, it's false because 8 is not less than 5. So for false, we print M2 is the smallest. Okay, is the smallest. M2 is the smallest. Perfect. But how about other values of M1 or M2, like M1 5 and M2 8. So the condition M1 is less than M2, yes, it's true. So we will print M1 is the smallest. Okay, that's it. So when M1 is 8 and M2 is 5, the condition is false, and we print M2 is the smallest. But when M1 is less than M2, so the condition is true, and we print M1 is the smallest. Okay, let's try this in Python. Okay, let's start. M1 is 8, M2 is 5, and we are going to use the if statement. If M1 is less than M2, okay, if it's true, we print M1 is the smallest. Okay, but if it's not true, or else we are going to print M2 is the smallest, and that's it. Okay, let's run the code. Just click on this green button. Okay, and the message show 5 is the smallest, and it's true because 5 is less than 8. Okay, this example is okay, and the message is this one, because M1 is not less than M2. The condition is false, so the message printed is M2 is the smallest. Okay, let's try with this example. M1 equals 5, M2 equals 8. Okay, let's change 5 and 8, and let's run the code. Oh, the message is the same, but the condition M1 is really less than M2, so we print M1 is the smallest. In this case, M1 is 5. Okay, this whole thing is called an if clause, and after this if clause you could have more code here. Okay, in this statement Python knows that this line are part of the true section of the if, and this line are part of the false section of the if. these two lines have spaces in front of them. This is the convention in Python. Usually we use 2, 3, or 4 spaces. In this case we're using 2 spaces. Okay? So in a different language you might see an if clause with parentheses and with curly brackets, but in Python we are using a column as well as 2 spaces in front of each line. You need to be really careful about the number of spaces that we use in front of each line, because eventually it will give us an error. So the error says indentation error, unexpected indent. Okay, let's take a look at a few more examples now using the input command. Okay, we are going to use a new command, call it input. When you need to read a string value like hello world, you have to use text equal input string value and then you can print the text like this. Okay, let's try it. So after this we are going to use text equal input string value and then we print the text. Okay, so let's run the code. Yes, 5 is the smallest. This part is this line, and then the program is asking us for an string value. You have to write here the text, and that text is going to be assigned to this variable, and we are going to print the variable here. Okay, let's try. Hello world. Enter. Okay, the string hello world is assigned to this variable, and we print the same variable after this line. Okay, well, when you need to read a numeric value like 5, 8, or 12, you have to use this command. Number equals int input value, okay, and print the number. This type of using the input command is for read a numeric value. Okay, let's try it. M equals int input numeric value. Okay, and then print m. So let's run the code. First, the program asks for a string value. How about word? And then it's asking for a numeric value. How about 2020? Yeah. First, we are reading a string, and then we are reading a numeric value. Okay? We read a string and print the string, and after we read a number and print the number. Okay, now let's modify this program. So instead of giving 5 or 8, we are going to read the values from the keyboard. So instead of m1 equals 5, we're going to change int input first value. Okay, and instead of 8, int input second value. So if m1 is less than m2, we're going to print m1 is the smallest. But if m1 is not less than m2, we are going to print m2 is the smallest. We're going to clear these comments. So let's try the program. Okay, first value 5, 8, and the answer is 5 is the smallest. Let's run the program again. Now 8 and 4, and 4 is the smallest. The program is using the if statement to check which one of those variables are the smallest. Okay? Every is going to be right, while m1 be different of m2. But how about if we put the same value of m1 and m2? For example, how about the first value 10 and the second value 10? 10 is the smallest. That's wrong, because they are the same. Here we have an error, because 10 is not the smallest. Unless that we check first if the numbers are equals, nesting if command. Please take care about the spaces in front of each line. For example, if m1 is equal m2, 2 points, and we print both of them, they are equals. But if are not equals, for else we add 2 spaces here. two spaces here, two spaces here, and finally two spaces here. We are nesting if comments. Okay? If it's true, this command is going to be executed. But if it's not true, these commands are going to be executed. Okay? Let's run the code. If we use 10 for the first value and 10 for the second value, we have the message both of them are equals. Okay? So if we use 5 for the first value and 8 for the second value, 5 is the smallest. Very good. And let's try 8 first and 5 second. 5 is the smallest. Now we have a very good program that validates if they are equals or which one is less than the other. Okay? Well, now let's create a simple BMI calculator. BMI, Body Mass Index, is basically a number that can tell if a person is overweight or not, depending on their height and weight. You have to use the weight in kilograms and the height in meters. After this evaluation, we have to check if the result is in one of these values. Underweight, normal, or overweight. Okay, let's calculate the BMI for these three people. Pedro, Pablo, and Vilma. Okay, let's calculate the BMI of Pedro. For weight 19 and height 1.7, we have 31.14. So Mr. Pedro would be in this category. Okay, now we are going to calculate for Mrs. Vilma. How about Vilma? For Vilma, weight 16 and height 1.6 multiplied by 1.6, we have 23.43. So Mrs. Vilma would be in this category. Normal. And how about Mr. Pablo? Weight 16, height 1.2 multiplied by 1.2, the result 41.66. So Mr. Pablo would be, extremely obese. Yeah. And that's it. Now we are going to program in Python. Okay? First, the weight int input wait and then height int input height. Okay, so I have to calculate BMI. So BMI is equal weight divided 4 parentheses 8 multiply height. Okay, and we are going to print BMI. So let's try for Mr. Pedro. Weight 90. Height 1.7. Oops, we have an error. What happened? Oh, that's it. We are using int for height, but we are giving 1.7. This is not an integer. This is not an integer value. It's not an integer value because it has a decimal point. So this variable must be float with decimals. So instead of int here, we have to use float. Okay, let's change it. Float. So let's run the code again. 90 1.7. Oh, very good. We have almost the same result. 3114.14. Let's try for Vilma. 60 1.6. Very good. We have 2343. 2343. Very good. And how about Pablo? 60 1.2. Very good. We have 41.66. 41.66. Everything is okay. Now we have to say in which category each of the examples belongs. Okay? Which one? This one. Pedro is this. Vilma is normal. And Pablo is extremely obese. Okay? So we have to use the if statement here. If less than 18 0.5 we have to print underweight. Okay, but if BMI is greater or equal 18.5 and BMI is less than 25, so we have to print normal. Okay, if BMI is greater or equal 25 and BMI is less than 30, so print overweight. Okay, but if BMI is greater or equal than 30 and BMI is less or equal 35, so we have to print obvious. Okay, and finally, if BMI is greater than 35, so we have to print extremely obvious. Okay, so let's try the program. Run the code, and we are going to use the pedrostat. So weight 19, height 1.7 for Pedro, and we have the value 31.40, and it says that is obese. That's correct. Very good. So we try for Vilma. 61.6. The result 23.43 is okay, and the result is normal. Normal, very good. And finally for Mr. Pablo, weight 16, but height 1.2. The result 41.66, and is extremely obvious. Extremely obvious. Very good. Okay, so we did our BMI calculator, body mass index calculator. You can save the program in your directory using an editor. Okay, so save your program with the name bmi.py. Okay? py. So that's it. Thank you and see you in the next video. Bye bye.